The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has just struck down California's ammunition laws, declaring them unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. This is a major development in the ongoing legal battle over the state's strict ammo regulations. The case in question is Road v. Bonta, and today's ruling represents a significant win for gun rights advocates. The court determined that California's requirements and restrictions on purchasing ammunition violate the Second Amendment. Naturally, a lot of people, especially here in California, are wondering what this means going forward. One of the biggest questions right now is whether this decision will lead to something like an Ammo Freedom Week, or a short-term window where Californians can buy ammunition without the usual restrictions. However, I want to be clear from the beginning. Despite the court's ruling, not much will change immediately. While this is a huge victory and lays the groundwork for permanently ending the ammo ban, the existing restrictions are likely to remain in place for now, at least until further steps are taken. That's because the Ninth Circuit previously issued a stay through its motions panel during the course of this appeal. That stay temporarily blocks the lower court's decision, meaning that the current laws will continue to be enforced unless the court lifts that stay or issues a mandate changing the situation. So at this moment, we're essentially in a holding pattern. The court's decision has been made, but we're waiting to see what happens next, including whether the Ninth Circuit will issue a mandate to lift the stay and how the state of California will respond. It's also likely that California will appeal this decision to the full en banc panel of the Ninth Circuit. Now, this new decision on California's ammunition law came from Judge Ikuta, who was joined by Judge Bade in issuing the majority opinion. Judge Bybee was the lone dissenting voice in this case. While this decision does not bring immediate relief to Californians, it still marks a major step in the right direction. The Ninth Circuit has now ruled that California's ammunition restrictions violate the Second Amendment, and they've done so using the legal framework set out by the U.S. Supreme Court in Bruen. In their ruling, the majority affirmed the district court's decision to grant a permanent injunction against California's ammunition background check law. The panel concluded that the law, which requires law-abiding gun owners to complete a background check each time they purchase ammunition, is unconstitutional. The judges applied the two-step analysis required under the Supreme Court's Bruen decision. Under the first step, they found that California's background check law falls within the plain text of the Second Amendment, because it imposes a real and direct burden on the right to keep and maintain operable firearms. Under the second step, the court examined whether California's law is consistent with the country's historical tradition of firearm regulation. The judges concluded that the state failed to prove that its law has any relevant historical precedent. In fact, the historical examples California presented were either from the wrong time period or not comparable in nature to the restrictions in question. As a result, the law could not survive constitutional scrutiny under the Bruen standard. The court also addressed an important footnote in the Bruen ruling. The state of California argued that since the Supreme Court had previously indicated that shall-issue permit systems might be constitutional, it could also justify similar systems for ammunition background checks. However, the panel firmly rejected that argument. They explained that Bruen did not actually declare shall-issue systems to be automatically lawful. It simply acknowledged that they might not raise the same constitutional concerns. Moreover, the court emphasized that ammunition background checks are significantly different from carry permits and cannot be treated as the same type of regulation. This rejection of California's argument is extremely significant. The Ninth Circuit panel made it clear that the state cannot stretch Bruen to justify entirely new layers of regulation, particularly not when those regulations restrict the core right to obtain ammunition for lawful purposes. In its conclusion, the court ruled that California's ammunition background check system violates the Second Amendment, and that the lower court judge, Judge Roger Benitez, did not abuse his discretion in granting a permanent injunction against the law. Now, on the other side of the decision, Judge Bybee offered a dissent. He argued that the ammunition background checks only cause a small delay and involve a minor fee, which in his view do not significantly infringe on the right to keep and bear arms. He also agreed with the state's argument that some shall-issue licensing schemes have been recognized by the Supreme Court as presumptively lawful. Judge Bybee believes that California's system falls into this category and that the plaintiffs did not do enough to challenge that presumption. In short, the dissenting judge supports the idea that objective, regulated systems, even for ammunition, can still align with the Second Amendment, as long as they don't present an outright ban. However, the majority opinion strongly disagreed and found California's system to be inconsistent with constitutional protections. So, based on everything covered so far, the majority of the Ninth Circuit panel has declared California's ammunition background check law unconstitutional. But what does that mean in practical terms? Can you now go online, purchase ammunition, and have it shipped directly to your doorstep in California? The answer, unfortunately, is not yet. As of this moment, the previous restrictions remain in place. That's because the Ninth Circuit panel placed a stay on Judge Benitez's original decision while the case proceeds through the appeal process. Until that stay is lifted, either by the same panel or a higher body within the Ninth Circuit, the current restrictions still apply. Also, it's important to remember that the state of California is certain to request an en banc review, which means they will ask for the full Ninth Circuit to rehear the case with a larger panel of judges. This is a common move when a state loses a high-profile case like this, and it's likely that the stay on Judge Benitez's ruling will remain in place until that review is completed, if it's granted. Now, some of you may be wondering whether this case will eventually reach the Supreme Court. The reality is that it's unlikely to happen anytime soon. One of the reasons is that the Supreme Court is already considering whether to take up the Duncan v. Bonta case, which involves California's magazine ban. Depending on what happens with that case, it could influence how or whether the court eventually addresses this ammunition background check issue. In fact, there's a possibility that the Ninth Circuit may delay further movement on this current case, known as the Road case, until the Supreme Court makes a decision on Duncan. That means we might not see any major developments for a while. That said, the ruling we've seen so far is still a major win for California gun owners. A panel of federal judges from the Ninth Circuit has officially stated that California's ammunition background check law violates the Second Amendment. That's significant. Now, while we wait to see how things play out procedurally, there's a slim chance that, if the case goes to an en banc review, a request could be made to lift the stay. If a favorable group of judges is selected for that en banc panel, they could potentially allow Judge Benitez's decision to go into effect while the case is still under review. If that happens, we might briefly see a period where ammunition purchases are less restricted, a sort of ammo freedom window. But again, that's purely speculative for now. Unfortunately, we're still stuck in a legal process that could take time. California gun owners will need to wait and see what the Ninth Circuit does next. It's not over, but this is definitely a positive step forward. As always, I'll keep you updated as more information becomes available. If you found this update helpful and want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Thanks again for your continued support. It means a lot.